along the lines of 2012, but lately the energies have been so intense. It's like we're in no time already. Just can't remember. I can't remember what I did yesterday. Things are just really bleeding together. Is it just our imagination, my imagination, or is it just the times we're coming to?
I think it is the evolution of a new opportunity, personally. Time and space both are part of our stories. Really, as a soul living in authentic, pure space, you're in all time and no time. But it's not linear time. It's a sense of time, just like in the dream world. You know how a dream can contain elements from yesterday and then skip to tomorrow, and it's like a deja vu, and it's all put together in the same package, and you're just skipping back and forth in the dream, and there's no time but all time. Well, the authentic self moves through consciousness in an all-time freedom. All time and space is available to the soul.
Right here and now.
Right here and now.
Anytime.
Anytime. Right here and now. All time is available to the soul. But what blocks it are our stories. Because our stories are linear. Even if they're very powerful, important stories that are important to live through, that contain a sense of purpose and caring for us. And I do not mean in any way to be derogatory about your stories. We cherish our stories,
Right.
many of them, but they are linear.
And they hold us back.
And they do keep you in the context of that story. But if nothing else, they are linear. They are linear. And they have their consequences that are built into the story. One of the homework assignments I give people, and I'll give it to you to do later after you go, if this is something you want to work through, is you actually sit down with, just like you were journaling, and you write down a story that you've lived, just the thumbnail parts of it. You know, you don't have to write a book, but just the gist of the story. And then you see the ending, and it wasn't exactly what you hoped for. Now, you go back to the point in the story, you locate the exact point in the story where you could have done something different that would have resulted in a different ending. And you begin to see yourself as the one who creates the stories through the choices you make all through those stories. Now, what is happening in the world right now, in my opinion, is that we are being able to make many, many choices that we could not make 10 or 15 years ago. And these new choices that are available to us are causing crisscrossing of stories. We're allowing us to have bleed through into other people's stories, and other people's stories are bleeding through into us, and sometimes there's a conflict of stories. Somebody will bring one story to the ball game, and we'll bring our story to the ball game. And there's an opportunity for melding those stories, or one story canceling out another, and having to choose, well, where do we go? What do we do with this? Or just dismissing all the stories. We can actually get to a point of confusion where we're seeing none of these stories are worth following through. None of them are worth living. Let's create something new here. I don't want to play out this story. Have you ever been in that predicament where you come together with a whole bunch of people? It happens all the time in families. And you say, I don't want to live out this story. You know? Hey, Mom, this is your story. It's a great story. All right. You know?
Don't make it mine.
Don't make it mine. I'll sit here and listen to your story if you have to tell me again and again. But don't make it my story. So families do that to each other all the time. Friends do that to each other all the time. Sometimes we just decide to completely dismiss the story and start a new one. Well, one of the things that's happening internationally is not only are we having an international blend of cultures and traditions, including an international conflict of cultures and religions and traditions. We're having a lot of technology that is allowing us to reach freely around the world, to touch and open up to people we couldn't have touched or even known their name a decade before. And this new freedom is making stories more expendable. Have you noticed the stories aren't as important as they used to be? If you talk to your grandfather, if your grandfather's still living, stories will be more important to your grandfather than they are to you.
Oh, I see. That's interesting.
Now,
And why is that?
and why is that? Because we have more choices
Than they did.
than they did. They pretty much had the stories that they inherited, and maybe a few lateral stories they could move into, but it was all pretty much conditioned by the environment they were born into, the culture, the tradition. Here, we've got so many stories cross-referencing, and so many opportunities to connect and communicate that don't involve a story at all, that we're starting to say, hey, let's just go live in Blogland. Is that a word everybody knows? Or a blog is a strange word that was invented, I guess, with a tongue-in-cheek about these communication boards on the internet. And there are all kinds of blogs, from healing to recovery to teens hooking up to each other to finding the next wonderful person in your life, to talking about products. For everything that's ever existed, there's a blog on the internet.
And that's new, right? The last couple of years? Or
Yeah,
3 years?
it's like the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people are just expressing what they feel in present time and opening up to their hopes as well as their reservations, or even their conflicts and their desires. Now, the real alternative to stories is the authentic experience. You know, you cannot get an authentic experience from a movie. You can get pretty close to it sometimes if the special effects are really good, and the emotional, if the acting is really good and the emotional communication is really good, but you can't get it. I could sit here all day and tell you guys about this great lunch I had, but the best thing is for you to go have that same lunch. You have a direct experience. That's what I mean by direct experience versus a story. There's some things that don't exist until you experience them. But you are the experiencer. It's not the experience having an experience. We have actually long since demonstrated that anything we observe scientifically is affected by the observation. It's the observer that it's all about. What you observe is partly what you bring to the situation and how you affect the situation. So again, it's not about story, it's not about data. There's only a certain percentage in any scientific feedback that really, really is objective, relevant data. The rest is our perception about it and what do we say it means. That's the problem with theories. Is theories are just conclusions that we've made based upon our perception, which involves what we brought to it in the first place, a small, partial input of data, and then what we said about it. And then with all of that, we try to go out to the world and prove it. The only way we can have a genuine science or a genuine, well-constructed orientation to life is to build it from direct experience. And I would say if more than 90% of your life is about stories, you need to do some work on direct experience. It's about priority. It's about percentages. A good portion of your life, and I would say hopefully at least 50% of your life needs to be direct experience.